Committee of the whole is called to order. We will stay at recess until we reach the quorum. And we will proceed on to Bill 120, a continuation of Bill 121-36 COR. Thank you, my colleagues. Committee of the Whole is called to order. My colleagues, we are now at Bill 121-36, COR, which is the hospital, community center, the center. Let me get the right word for that, my colleagues. It's an act to add a Chapter 83 to Title 12, Division 2, Guam Code Annotated, relative to the design, build, finance, lease, transfer, and maintenance of the Guam 21st Century Healthcare Center, which shall be called the Guam 21st Century Healthcare Center Construction of Act of 2021. My colleagues, we set this aside and we entertain it, Bill 130. We are now back to 121, and I will remind the panels that were sworn in yesterday, and that's Ms. Tyrone, Ms. Posadas, Mr. Guerrero, Mr. Byrne, and I would ask the four ladies to my immediate right to please rise while you are being sworn in. There's 4 of you ladies. Oh, Tina, we got you yourself. I apologize, Tina, you were sworn in also yesterday.
Please raise your right hand. Under penalty of perjury, do you all affirm that any and all information that you provide today, whether it be verbally, electronically, and in writing, be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Oh, yes. Mr. Chair, they're all under oath. You may proceed.
Thank you, Sergeant Arms. I remind my colleagues, rules of engagement, we will have 2 rounds of questions for the panel. Will each senator allotted 5 minutes for questions, not including responses. Time to speak may not be yielded from more than one member to another. A member who used that member's time on a question yields all that member's time on that question and may not later speak, even if all the time yielded was not used. At the completion of the 2 rounds of questions, panelists will be excused until called upon for the next bill in discussion, which would be Bill 153. Amendments to each bill will be entertained after the 2 rounds of questions. After we complete the amendments on the bill, we will proceed to the next bill. When we reach the amendment portion, at that time, you can use your 5 minutes to make comments. So it can be amendments or comments. It's not 1 plus 1, it's one or the other. All right? The materials for the Committee of the Whole are in the shared session Google Drive folder labeled 9.28.21, Committee of the Whole. Proposed amendment must be submitted in writing to the clerk via email, 36glsession@gmail.com. Amendments not in writing will be called out of order. My colleagues, once you reach the second round, please prepare all your amendments. After we complete the amendments to each bill, then I will entertain a motion to rise from the Committee of the Whole, at which time I will report out the bill as recommended by the Committee of the Whole. Thank you. We will now begin our first round of questions. We left off with Senator Tello Tideway. We will continue, or correction, not continue, but we will begin with Senator Tello. Your 5 minutes.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm wondering, a lot of the panel that's here before us gave us testimony at the public hearing, but I'm wondering if there's any updates to that, if we could just allow them to do that and we get that all out of the way and we all can hear it at one time instead of
all right,
bit
okay.
by bit.
If my colleagues would allow that, then not a problem. We won't begin the questions yet. I would ask now I would then begin with the Gita folks first, because they would be the folks that, if this bill passes, will be entertaining the whole program. Ms. Mel Mendiola or Ms. Tina Garcia, if you could please go ahead and present any update from our public hearing. And then we'll move to Mr. Burns or anyone else that would like to speak in reference to any of their concerns. Ms. Mendiola?
We're reviewing our testimony, Mr. Chair, and at this point in time, we have nothing new to update the body on.
All right, you have nothing. Does anyone in the panel have anything else that they want to update? Anything new? If not, then we'll proceed. Beginning with Senator Tello. You have 5 minutes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. This question is to Daphne from Department of Revenue Tax. Daphne, in public law, or not public law, but U.S. Law 117 describes the ability for us to receive EITC in reimbursement. And It says calendar year, within calendar year 2021. My question is, this reimbursement that's anticipated to come, is that for the reimbursement for tax year FY21 or tax year 2020?
Thank you, Senator Titlegy, for that question. With regards to the reimbursement that was authorized by the ARP Act of 2021, the way that the law reads is, although it states with respect to calendar year 2021, the law also states that, except as otherwise provided, the Secretary shall make payments to the Virgin Islands, Guam, and the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands equal to the cost of such possession of the earned income tax credit for taxable years beginning in or with such calendar year. So it's for taxable years beginning in or with calendar year 2021. So that means it's actually tax year 2021.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. And the earned income tax credit, the EITC and the CTC, there was documentation between Treasury or the federal government and DRT to formulate this money coming in, the 93, if I'm not mistaken, $1 million that came in, and it required that it goes into a lockbox. Has Rev and Tax started this process with the federal government on the earned income tax credit? Currently have, I guess you're crossing your T's, dotting your I's on how to proceed with this and what are the rules and engagements utilizing this funding. Has that been completed yet?
No, ma'am. And so with regards to the $93 million that we received, that was for the child tax credit. With regards to the EITC or the earned income tax credit, those discussions have not started yet.
And when do you anticipate that, Daph?
I was actually hoping we would already have started, so that's something we're going to need to follow up with the IRS on, but we have not been able to meet regarding that yet.
Daphne, can you tell me, is this money anything that you foresee, that you're comfortable to say, that this money by the federal government, that the federal government will not put this in like a lockbox or where the child tax credit is at right now? It's in a trust. That's it, a trust fund. Do you see that happening for this earned income tax credit? Can you reassure us that that's not going to happen?
No, at this point it's difficult to say. Just kind of based on history, the additional child tax credit, which we have been already being reimbursed for, that was received as a reimbursement of the general fund on a quarterly basis after we've already made payment. Then, of course, we got to the CTC where we actually receive the money in advance. It gets put into a trust fund. At this point, I cannot say for sure how we're going to be receiving the money for EITC, whether it's going to be in the form of an advance or whether it's going to be as a reimbursement. I don't have that information yet.
Can you, Daphne, can you tell me in your best guesstimate, and I guess that's what we're all here, because this is, like the cart before the horse, this legislation. And so my question is, can you give the best guesstimate with regards to when do you think we'll receive this funding?
So if it's received as a reimbursement, and if we kind of replicate or utilize our experience with the additional child tax credit, which we already receive, then which we receive on a quarterly basis, then it's possible we could receive the money beginning if we utilize the same process that we have in place for the ACTC already. Then again, likely it's like if it's the first quarter after we begin to process and make payments, then perhaps in second quarter of 2022. Again, that's following the same process that we have for ACTC, but it's difficult to say because we don't know how it's going to be received yet.
So the second quarter of FY22 is, I believe, first quarter said January?
Second quarter for a calendar year, so April to June.
So not until April or June. That's your best guesstimate. I understand. You're just trying to, and I appreciate you trying to make that a point. Okay, thank you, Daphne. To Geeta, Melanie, I've attended many of your, the hospital group task force, and in that, it was showing that it's it's basically $1,067,300,000 for this project. minus the 300,000 that's anticipated from the ARP funding, which we don't know if that's been approved yet, whether we can use it or not. The remaining amount total to be financed is $767,300,000. This bill requires us, or is allowing us $600 million. My question is, that leaves $167,300,000 that we need to come up with. Have you,
Thank you for that question,
Yeah.
Senator. The estimates at the task force meetings were certainly, they were estimates at the time, and they're based off of, so the hospital, as I think I've stated before, the hospital's estimate is based on the Army Corps of Engineers report, and, but public health, in addition to Guam Behavioral, have not had a formal assessment of what their construction costs would be. And so I wouldn't narrow it down to a shortage of, let's say, to say that we're $160 million short at this juncture. I also think we are also very aggressively going after various types of federal grants to bring down the cost of construction as much as possible. And so I do think that the amount authorized within this legislation should at least be able to construct the hospital, and then basically should in the least be able to construct the hospital as we continue to concurrently look for other sources of funding for the other buildings as well.
Thank you. However, if you go further down, it talks about, insurance, maintenance, CIP reserves, deposit of 25% for annual rent. Then after all this is done with a 30-year lease or 30-year, loan amount at 5%, that leaves you an annual pay, or not an annual, but an annual lease payment of $60 million. This bill is setting aside $35 million. So we're short there as well. Do you have anything to say about that, how we're going to find the funding? Even though, remember now, the Army Corps of Engineers also told us that it's going to take at least 2 years to 3 years to put this all together, and which at that time, we have to incorporate the cost of construction going up, inflation going up, especially the way the United States is spending money. We're anticipating some type of inflation moving. And I do understand that you have infrastructure and other costs at $50 million just in that case. Do you think that's going to be enough?
I think that $50 million is a good estimate for now. We've received some preliminary estimates from GPA that the power alone will be about in the $14 to $15 million range. And so I think the $50 million estimate at this juncture is a good estimate.
One other question with the credit, our debt ceiling right now is showing at 300, if I'm not mistaken, the debt ceiling is just showing at 353,102.73. This bill is for $600 million. That's below the debt, that's way above the debt ceiling that we're authorized right now. So how are you going to adjust that?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. As articulated in the bill authorizes a lease-leaseback, which does not fall into the debt ceiling, similar to some of the schools that have been authorized in the past, such as Teason High School.
Thank you, Senator
Okay, thank you,
Tello.
Mr. Chair. So it looks like it's the only thing that's going to go through on here is a lease back. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Blas, do you have any questions for the panel?
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for everybody being here. I guess, and I recognize that a lot of these numbers and the question I'm going to ask is basically preliminary at best. But we know and we recognize that the hospital, if we were to do the hospital, how much would that be? 760 million?
Yes, sir. Senator, $760 million per the Army Corps of Engineers report.
Per the Army Corps of Engineers,
That's
and that's why it
correct.
says preliminarily. So, Ms. Posadas, is that number 760?
Sorry, I'm not used to all this, but based on the Army Corps Engineer report, when they did the assessment in 2018, and they came out with their report in March of 2020, or January, what Plan A, Option A, was to construct a new hospital at a price tag of $743 million.
Okay.
That again is taking pretty much similar size of what we have currently to reconstruct, to remodel, to repair the hospital as it is and just keep it there in Tamuning. It's $761 million.
Okay, there was a number that was thrown out about $814 million. Where did that come from? Or 817 million?
814 million?
The, Senator?
Senator Blas?
The 817 million was a part of the task force report assessing a 10% escalation to the 760 million. As you're aware, construction costs have gone up and island-wide. And so that was an assessment made after we were doing another project, and the project had inflated, the project's price tag had gone up. So we went ahead and, to be safe, factored in the escalation into this project as well.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Ariola, for Guam Behavioral Health, I'm assuming that you've already started to have discussions with regard to what your needs will be and what your preliminary costs will be as well. Can you provide us that?
Thank you, Senator. We've had internal meetings with the team at Guam Behavioral Health. We've also had meetings with Matrix. And so we know what services are going to be moving to the compound and what the current facilities will be used for, and primarily for outpatient, especially in the growing drug and alcohol epidemic. We're looking at outpatient being there, and more beds in the current AIU units in Tamuning. So as for the costs, we've cost estimate based on working with GITA at $100 million.
Okay.
And of course, we're very aggressive with, I would say, one of the more aggressive departments in obtaining federal grants. And so I'm very optimistic the way we search and our track record of receiving federal funding, that that number, of course, we're going to always try to reduce as much as possible, depending on how many federal grants we
Okay, so
get.
conservatively, just for sake of conversation, what is your goal, or what can you realistically receive in as far as grants to reduce this 100 million? How much grants do you think you can get?
I'm not sure if we can, I mean, you're asking me to
Right.
guess how much grants I'm able to get?
Okay, let me put it this way. What's the total grant amount that you're actively pursuing right now?
Today,
Yeah,
30 million.
30 million.
We have
if you were
30
to
million
get,
of federal grants today.
so that basically reduces your 100 to 70 million dollars. So that's assuming that you get the 30 million. Okay, remember these are all basically assumptions,
Right.
right? Okay, that's good. Bertha, Ms. Tyron, Public Health. What's your price tag?
Hi, Senator. So as for public health and social services, we haven't had a formal assessment done on the construction of the new public health facility. We have a team at the department that meets internally every 2 weeks to develop our owner's project requirement document. We're working closely with GURA to assist with to provide technical assistance, but in terms of a price tag, we don't have that number at the moment. But we do have funding for the lab, which is $33 million.
Pardon me?
We have funding to construct the public health lab at $33 million. This is CDC.
Okay, but you still don't know what your preliminarily what your cost may be to contribute to this healthcare of excellence, this compound, right?
Not at this
Yeah,
moment.
I understand. Do you not have a timeline as to when you guys can probably start talking numbers?
So we are in the process of putting together our documents that eventually will help to develop, put together the A&E design and work with the contractor. So we're thinking maybe sometime next fiscal year, we're going to start doing that.
Okay, Mr. Chair, and the reason why I'm asking these questions, in as far as preliminary estimates and stuff, again, it goes back to, okay, what's the total cost of this? And then it's going to come down to, okay, how is this all of this going to get funded? I can appreciate this body's attempt to be able to try to help to provide them some funding to be able to jumpstart and allow this thing, but it goes back to a conversation we had on a previous bill, okay? You got a plan, but where's the plan? Where's the money, and how are you going to get it? And that's where my uneasiness continues to be in this whole process. So what I'm going to do is let me listen to the other questions from my other colleagues and come down around two, maybe answer some of those questions that I may have. But for the sake of being able to time, because you keep, I can sit and talk for another 2 minutes and 20 seconds, but I'll defer to other colleagues right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Blas. Senator Peter, do you have any questions for the panel? None? Senator Clint, do you have any questions for the panel? All right, sir.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my question would be for, I guess, anyone on the panel who's been involved with, the task force and with discussions with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. I know that recently the Army Corps has been talking about putting together a charrette is the term that they use, which is a fancy French word for meeting. So my understanding is that, or series of meetings. So my understanding is that there's talk about this charrette, and there's talk about getting funding for the charrette, and I read a report that said the governor officially put in a request from the Department of Interior for funding to begin this charrette. So my question is, how will this bill factor into these meetings and the charrette timeline-wise?
Half a day, Senator, and thank you for that question. I think prior to the planning charrette, there are a number of action items that can be taken in the immediate, and these include a lot of site prep types of surveys and work that can be done, in addition to some infrastructure work that can be done, especially specifically to the construction of the hospital. I think that the planning charrette is incredibly important from the perspective of planning for the entire footprint of the medical campus. So the entire footprint of the medical campus is inclusive of the hospital, public health, and Guam Behavioral, as we're all aware. But specific to the immediate steps that can occur in advance of a planning charrette are much of the planning and prep work specific to the construction of a new hospital. And so the planning charrette is more of the overarching medical campus plan versus the things that can be done today, which are specific to the hospital, and other specific projects that we can turn dirt over sooner versus later, such as the public health CDC lab.
So my question is, with proceeding with the charrette, okay, so the charrette was offered by the Army Corps of Engineers, right? The charrette was offered as a means of planning for development of this health campus, right? And it was relayed in that meeting that this planning can take anywhere from a year to a couple of years. So that's why my question, I guess, to refine my question is this bill too soon? Should we wait until the charrette is over? Or is this something that the administration would like for us to proceed with this bill to get the funding going while the charrette is going?
I think Senator, the intention of the planning charrette is to address the campus in its entirety. And this specific bill can allow us to go out and at least fund one of the more urgent projects, which is the Guam Memorial Hospital. One of the reasons I believe that the Army Corps cited taking a little bit longer is in the instance of the need for, say, an EIS. But that's also because Army Corps' last hospital that they built was built on a base, on a military base. As you're aware, this is not a military base. It's a government of Guam hospital, and as such, an EIS, whether or not we need one at this juncture, has not been determined. So I think that's why, I believe that that's why the Army Corps went out as long as 5 years. Having said that, what can be done in the next 12 months? Of course, like I said, the pre-planning and pre-prep for the projects that are already positioned and ready to go, that has a smaller footprint on the larger medical campus. So that's what we're preparing to proceed with in the immediate, in advance or concurrent with the charrette, I guess.
Okay, so just to clarify, sounds to me like what you're saying is that we can proceed with this bill. We'll get the ball rolling as far as getting funding identified and getting funding available that can be used on projects that aren't necessarily tied to the charrette, that can begin already as the charrette is ongoing? Is that basically what you're saying?
I think the projects that the charrette can cover will be inclusive of, I think the charrette can be run concurrent with getting projects a little bit further ahead. So it's not outside of, so the planning charrette wouldn't cover projects outside of what's covered. They would cover projects also covered in the next 12 months. It's just that they would take a second look. It would be a concurrent assessment. So there's the preliminary things that we can do right now specific to certain sites and certain projects. The planning charrette can come in. We don't want them to do double work, of course, but some of the planning work that they can do will likely cover the footprint that has already been touched by preliminary studies.
Okay, so again, you're representing that as far as you're concerned, this bill can proceed while the charrette is ongoing. We can pass the bill and still do the charrette.
Yes, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Clint. Senator Parrish, do you have any questions for the panel?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon to all the panel members. So I guess my first question would be to Director Shimizu. Regarding the ARP bill, is there any indication that the EIT will be reimbursed? Will it be a recurring reimbursement?
With regards to the EITC, my understanding is it's going to be a permanent funded mandate. So where before we were paying it and we were not receiving any funding from the federal government for it, the ARP Act allows for it to be permanently funded.
Okay, thank you for that response. Okay, question for Administrator Mendiola, or Mel. So do you recall the cost of the Naval Hospital, when it, was it $300 million?
I'm sorry, Senator, I don't know, but I can do some research and find out for you.
Okay, yeah, so that's one of my biggest concerns is, where can we cut the cost to make it affordable, right? And, I do appreciate the time that Gita spent in explaining the project developer contractor concept, and it was already done with DOE, with the build of 4 different schools. And I just maybe want to get your input as to, is it going to be any different from that project where they built a Stumbo, I believe, what are the other schools? There were 4 schools that were built simultaneously using this same concept. And do you foresee this being very or exactly alike? Or if not, then what are the differences?
I think the instrument is similar, but the project, of course, is larger in scope. And so it will be, there will be more involved from the perspective of planning, preparation, design. There's a lot, I think that there's a lot more planning that goes into this. There is more planning that's going into this than what would have gone into schools. You're not just talking about building a hospital to respond to the need today. You're talking about you're not just talking about a medical campus that will respond to the need today. You're talking about a medical campus that will respond to the Guam's medical needs for the next 50 years. And so given that, I think that this is a more comprehensive assessment of what our medical community needs, or what our community needs with regard to medical services, than a study for a school replacement would be.
If I may, this is Lillian. Your question, Senator Perez, is it comparing Naval Hospital? Was that what it is? Is
Yeah.
that what I understood?
Yes, well, that was yeah, do you recall the cost of that?
And the difference with Naval Hospital is a lot of their services are outpatient. Our hospital will be primarily inpatient beds, and so with some expanded services, such as more radiological procedures and diagnostic procedures that we want to make available. So that to me is a comparison as far as Naval Hospital and Guam Memorial Hospital, why it's more complicated and more costly. Thank you.
Thank you for that as well.
We used Google to look up your answer for the Naval Hospital. It was a $158 million project, and it was probably priced out in 2012, so about 9 years ago. 48 beds. The new hospital will likely be somewhere in the neighborhood of 200 beds.
250 to 300.
300 beds. Sorry, thank you, Administrator.
Because we're projecting forward in terms of not just for 10 years, but also 20 years ahead.
And if you just multiplied that 150 beds times, or 48 beds, and you inflated it to the 300 beds, we're looking at a $900 million project equivalent.
Appreciate that comparison. Okay, so then the Army Corps of Engineer estimate is pretty reasonable. It's a reasonable amount then, the 700 million.
But keep in mind, as I mentioned earlier, their estimate is based on what we have currently. That's what they said. It's similar to what we have currently.
Do you have any other questions, Senator Bears?
Yes, I do. Okay, so I know in the news recently, Congressman San Nicolas said that he might be able to obtain some DOI funding. How does that affect the amount that we are going to go to borrow?
If he's able to procure that amount of money, that would be very good for this project, and that would absolutely bring down the cost of this project.
So then the bonds, we don't have to authorize the use of that much money?
Well, you certainly wouldn't want to put the cart before the horse and authorize less in advance of receiving any news of this award, of a grant award. That's so. However, you can.
Sorry, the time is running, Mr. Chair. If you can revert some of that time back, I appreciate that.
Staff.
Right.
Apologies, yeah, if you can continue.
We'll make the appropriate adjustments. Senator Perez, just continue, please.
Senator, I believe that if the $300 million or so was secured by Congressman San Nicolas, then any funding that has been taken out can be obligated to the other pieces of the medical campus that maybe aren't affordable at this juncture with the 700 million or so that's being authorized under this legislation.
All right, thank you. And the other question, I think, is the debt ceiling. I know that was addressed, but in looking at the substitute bill, there's still language of appropriation in there. Does that need to be modified?
Just a moment, Senator. We will, while I confirm. Senator, are you referring to page 12, line 20, line 13, or another part of the bill?
Yes, page 12, line 17 or 18.
And your question once more, please?
Yes, so is that language sufficient to ensure that we're not affecting the debt ceiling? Because I believe the wording should have been pledged, right? Pledged versus appropriated.
Go ahead and answer.
Thank you, Senator. We did have to change a couple of words, and we put that in our testimony, and it was the language on the top where it said a pledge or other reservation, and that's line 11 of that bill, and so because it's up there, that's what it covers.
Okay, thank you. And then the other part that may hint at debt ceiling issues is page 14, line 10. It still has bonds in there, and I understand that GITA can assist with obtaining financing, the triple exempt bonds, but obviously the leaseback does not affect debt ceiling. Would that language bonds would have to be changed?
So what this is a reference to the bonds that are going to be sold to the investors, and even though the vehicle for the government of Guam is a certificate of participation, we are still selling bonds to the investors.
Okay. All right. Okay, thank you for that. Yeah, I'm too concerned about, I guess, bringing down the costs as much as possible. Perhaps the other question that I have is related to, so everything's packaged together. So we have the utilities, we have the computer system, and so we know the utilities rates will probably go up at some point, and we're paying these fixed costs. So what effect would that have on the operations of the facility? Should they have to cut costs elsewhere? What is that scenario going to look like?
Okay, so the electrical costs and other infrastructure costs are paid with what we call the additional rentals, and that cost, just like with DOE, they come in annually to either adjust or amend that additional rental amount based on, discussions and approval of the senators or the legislature. So again, we're looking at the fixed base rental, and then the additional cost is the one that gets adjusted annually, because it does require annual appropriation, as opposed to, just a fixed cost going straight across. So that's the vehicle we're using for a leaseback financing.
So what would the bond that we borrow, what would that cover?
The bond, we pay the bond with what we call a base rent, which is, that's a fixed cost for the 20, 30-year bond that we will borrow. And then additional rentals, yeah, as part of the design, build, finance lease. And so the additional rentals will cover the amount needed. So what we've done in the past is we've said that similar to here, to what's here, 35 mil is what we want to set as the ceiling for the first year rental payment, total payment for the lease back. And then as we get into the financing, and when we work with the developer, they will say, okay, 35 million is what I have to work with per year. This is how much I'm going to estimate will be additional rentals, and then this much will be for the base debt service payment. So just like with JFK, with Tizen, with the other four schools under the GAFE leaseback, there's a base rental that doesn't change, and then there's a, quote, additional rental that is stated there. And if there's any increase, and again, they come to the legislature annually to get it appropriated, the base and the additional rental.
So I guess, okay, thank you for that. So I guess the question is, the bond that we're borrowing isn't necessarily going to cover all the costs.
The bond we're borrowing is for the design construction, and then there's an annual maintenance cost that is covered under that additional rentals. So the 35 mil, if you give us a cap of 35 mil, what we may end up with, and again, I won't know this till we go to market, is a 30 mil base rental and a 5 mil annual additional rental. And whenever we negotiate these deals or finance these deals, we always give them the cap that they have to work with, kind of the bid that they come in with.
Okay.
To say, based on 35, I can finance this much, and 5 mil will be from additional rentals set aside, as an example.
Okay.
And again, I won't know that number until we go to market.
Can you break down what's in a base rental versus what's in the additional rental?
Base rental is strictly the payment of principal and interest of the bond. Additional rentals will cover the maintenance, insurance, and utilities, if that's negotiated in the financing.
Okay.
Yeah, all O&M costs. So they'll pay, that'll pay for the facility.
And so if they spend under that 5 million, where does that extra money go to?
And again, every year we'll come to the legislature. We would come to the legislature saying, this is our insurance cost, this is our maintenance cost based on discussion with the healthcare centers of what needs to be done. So every year we would review that maintenance cost.
So the savings would go, how would that?
Then you wouldn't appropriate the 5 mil if it comes in less.
Okay, thanks. So thank you for that. For Lillian Posadas, do you know what the cost is for operations currently? I guess utilities, especially like power and water. Do you have a breakdown cost?
Senator, I apologize, I don't have that number right now, but I can certainly get that for you. I know in the budget that we had submitted, the utilities is in there in terms of our operational expense. So I can pull that out.
Okay.
And get that to you.
Yeah, maybe OFB might be
What was
a bit
that?
quicker. Yeah, I appreciate, maybe Steve, if you can provide the breakdown cost of utilities for all three agencies? Sorry.
I'm sorry, Senator, can you repeat the question?
Of course. Just wanted to ask if you can give a breakdown cost of all the utilities for the three agencies? You don't have to give it to me right now. I know you probably don't have it readily accessible, but maybe in later today be fine.
I will try to get the information for you.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have any more questions, Senator Paris?
Maybe this is good for now. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Senator Amanda Shelton, do you have any questions for the panel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be quick. I just have a follow-up about the Army Corps of Engineers. We received a briefing, the legislature received a briefing from them stating that the cost of the charrette would be about $3 million for this initial planning stage. And I wanted to know, there was discussion earlier about a request from the governor to the Department of Interior to cover this. Was there any response that we received yet? Can we count on that being covered by them?
There's been no response as of yet, Senator.
Okay, thank you very much. And so, with or without the commitment from DOI, is the administration committed to securing the services of the Army Corps of Engineers for this project?
It is highly likely that the Army Corps of Engineers will be secured for some portion of this project, potentially construction management and others. But the dialogue between the government of Guam and Army Corps of Engineers we're still kind of working out what exactly they can provide.
Okay, and can you tell us if in that project will also be included the behavioral health facility and the public health facility? Because when we had the initial discussion, it was just about the hospital. But if we are to secure their services, will it be inclusive of the entire campus?
Go ahead, Matt.
Thank you, Senator. I just wanted to chime in because I was at the discussion in the administration with the Army Corps. And definitely public health, all three health agencies are included. The governor has requested from the Army Corps for all that they can provide. That letter is, as you know, was sent out, and I guess we're waiting for official word. But, and there is no official feedback, as Mel has responded. But I can tell you that Guam Behavioral Health is very much a part of the discussion. Of course, the need for a new hospital, nobody can ever question, and I thank Senator San Augustine for his vision for this bill and everyone that signed up as supporters of it, because so in that discussion, in that meeting with Army Corps and the governor and the executive branch, it was brought to my attention that the latest building that the Army Corps has built, healthcare building, was actually a behavioral health center in Honolulu, and that was just 2 years ago. So unfortunately, because of COVID, I've had several meetings for other reasons to go to Hawaii, but I couldn't get there. But as soon as I can get to Hawaii, they have committed to see the state-of-the-art facilities. So I'm excited because actually Army Corps' most recent experience is a behavioral health agency. So yes, we're very much a part of the discussion.
Okay, thank you very much. I asked these questions about the Army Corps of Engineers because this is the group that has been presented to us for building all of these facilities, and I'm wondering, are they the best value for the people of Guam to get these projects done? I mean, we haven't really seen any other options here, but are options being explored?
If I may, Senator, based on our experience with the Army Corps when they were here in November, I was very, very impressed with their expertise, with their, the engineers, and they're the experts in terms of hospitals. And given that the hospital is a priority to get it replaced, I strongly support that we continue the relationship with the Army Corps because they're the experts. We don't have any experts on island with regards to building a hospital. And so I would like to continue working with the Army Corps of Engineers.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm glad to hear your confidence in the entity that we have that you're already working with. So thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Senator Brown, do you have any questions for the panel? Ma'am.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I did want to ask with regards to our debt service, what is our current, where are we now annually in terms of what we pay out for current obligations? Since that normally is what comes off the table every fiscal year before we leave anything else for appropriation.
I'm pulling it up, Senator. Just give me one moment. Senator, 49.7 million.
49,
For fiscal '21, 49.7 million.
and that's all we currently pay in debt service with all our bonds that are obligated under the government of Guam?
Outside of the autonomous agency bonds, so outside of GPA, GWA. This is for our general obligation and limited obligation, as well as our lease. This also includes our lease, TZN and JFK, so our
This
certificates of
includes-
participation.
what are the current ones? JFK, everyone's familiar with that. What are the others that we pay for, just to give us a...
Sure, a UOG loan, BPT bonds, GDOE Okadu, TZN, lease, BPT bonds, Section 30 limited obligation, GCC loan, general obligation. 2019, this was the GSWA, the cell, GDOE JFK, hot bonds, and that's it for 2021.
And with regards to the current proposal, because yes, I know we briefly discussed this before a month or a month and a half ago when this issue was brought before us, also looking at the budget, but I mean, what would we be looking at in general? Again, these are round numbers because we don't, again, I still don't know yet what we're exactly talking about in terms of what, right sizing to ensure that the hospital we're building is going to meet our needs. But more importantly, I love all new things too, but I want to know what it's going to cost us, and is it something that we can afford? Because at the rate we're going, maybe every 40 years we tear a building down and build a new one. But if we were just looking at the hospital itself in terms of current proposals, and again, those things don't get finalized until we actually execute this, but what are we looking at if it's just the hospital itself, to finance just the hospital? What is the administration proposing?
Specific to what is affordable under this proposed legislation, I think it's the hospital is really primarily what we'd be looking at. One thing I think also to note, Senator, is that public health currently pays rents, and those rents are currently, most of it is federally funded as far as I know, in addition to locally funded. So those rents are already being paid out in the budget, and so that's something I would also just kind of take into consideration as I plan going forward. But under the current legislation, it doesn't look like it may not cover all three agencies. It may just cover the hospital, but I think even covering the hospital is a very good thing at this juncture and at the current state of the hospital.
So what figure are we looking at? Because the last time we had this discussion, I mean, it was kind of bandied about. It's going to cost $100 million for behavioral health, another $100 million for public health. Those are figures that were publicly stated. So I just want to know what are we looking at? Just a general round figure for the hospital itself. And have you revised your recommendations on the financing costs for public health or behavioral health?
Currently, for the hospital alone, we're looking at a $760 million as put out there by the Army Corps, plus a 10% escalation, for a total amount of $817 million. And the estimates for public health and Guam behavioral have not yet been updated.
Okay, so I won't hold myself or hold you then to the $100 million figure each that was discussed. With regards to, and again, I see that the proposal's here for $35 million, and of course, we've talked a lot about, the EITC and the reimbursement of that, and As our Director of Revenue Tax had mentioned, we're probably looking at next year, perhaps for that fund, those funds to be available, that it's not something we're going to get in the next few months. With regards to the financing for the hospital, again, I don't know if this is going to accommodate the number of rooms that were mentioned, the level of health care that's going to be provided, the building, not just the physical infrastructure, but I'm sure the equipment and everything else that has to go into, including the health professionals that have to be hired, and on top of that, just the long-term, what it's going to cost to keep the hospital operating annually. What's the operating costs going to be for the hospital? With regards to, if you're looking at this, because would we venture to say this would be the single largest financing execution the government of Guam will undertake so far? Have we ever financed anything larger than this?
These, Tina and I are discussing the largest thus far, we believe, is about 500 million authorized for GWA.
Yeah, I would assume that, maybe the airport after that. It would either be Waterworks Power or probably the airport. I mean, I recall them with their, $300+ million bonds that they've received. And are we open to the possibility? Concerned for myself, I would be very supportive of a new hospital. I'm not as inclined to want to finance at this point also public health or behavioral health. Understanding, of course, as you mentioned, they are renting, but I think those things to me could be looked at on a separate track. I'm not necessarily bought on this idea of needing to consolidate because of the price tag. And because of the uncertainty of where we're at right now, and I look at it from that perspective, I don't know where we're going to be a year from now. I mean, we're sitting here still heading into year 2 with this mask, and if the federal funds don't keep flowing, I think we all know where we're going to be. It's probably not something we want to say right here and now, but I think we all think it. And so I'm just a little conservative in the approach of wanting to put everything in the basket and say, sure, here it is. Or even with the funding of the EITC coming in, that's wonderful, but I know there's many other obligations or needs of this government that could eat that up very quickly. And there's also substantial appropriations that far exceed this amount of what we're anticipating already in the Guam Legislature. So I just want to bring that up. But is that something the administration would be open to? Maybe I shouldn't be concerned what the administration is open to, but if we were to simply look right now at just funding the hospital, because again, I still don't know, or do you have an idea for sure where the location is? I mean, I've heard the discussion of the Mangilo property that's currently under the federal government, but do we have anything more concrete? Is that the ultimate location that's really what's desired, or?
I can't speak for everyone at the table. I wouldn't speak yet for everyone at the table, but per the size of per the amount proposed within this legislation, I would absolutely be open to this covering the hospital. Because, as we had mentioned, we are also looking at very aggressively, our colleagues at Guam Behavioral are looking very aggressively at grant funding, and the life of her building she's still okay. And Department of Public Health, DPHSS, they currently have funding for their CDC lab. And given that they do have current funding for one aspect of public health, we can comfortably proceed and continue to pursue other avenues of funding for public health. And if this is the amount that you're comfortable with, Senator, I think that if this covers GMH alone, then that's a very good thing at this juncture.
Because I think I have just a few seconds left, but I think it's fair to say we could always go to the bond market any time. We're not restricted to having to execute it now and then at some point see what the plan is.
Yes,
Thank you,
very possible.
Mr. Chair. I'll reserve for next round. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Brown. Senator Adams, do you have any questions for the panel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to follow up on my colleague's question here on the location, is Eagles Field still the desired location for the compound, I believe?
Thank you, Senator, and I know you're looking at me. Yes, it is the desired and the preferred, because again, it's central. And you know how the people of the South are always feeling like it's just too far to travel up to the north. So we want to make it accessible and available for all of Guam. So Manila is the central location. It is the desired location.
Okay, awesome. That being said then, to Gita, my question would be, if Eagles Field is the desired location for the facility, what agreement would this be? Would this be a lease agreement between the government of Guam and the federal government?
It is a license, and then between the lessor and the lessee, in the event of a leaseback, it would be a lease for the building. Yes, a lease for the structure.
So then this would be allowed within the lessor leasee agreement to lease back for the facility?
Yes, yes, Senator.
Okay, so now, many agencies have come to this body previously saying that the properties need to be in their ownership, for example, in order to be to avail themselves of federal grants that would be available to build a facility. How would this hamper the ability to obtain federal grants for the facility if we don't own the property?
Senator, I think that's going to largely depend on the type of federal grant, because you're absolutely right. There are certain federal grants out there that require ownership. There are other grants out there that don't require ownership but may require a controlling interest. And so if the government of Guam has a controlling interest over the property, that may be sufficient for grants, but it really cannot be guaranteed until we cross that bridge.
So then, has the three agencies, Department of Public Health, Guam Memorial Hospital, and Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness, the grants that they applied for, are these grants open to the type of facility that is going to be built, and that they understand that it will be on a leaseback, on property that is on a lessor leasee type agreement?
Senator, if I can add, because I've had great experience in grant writing. I can tell you that whenever a lease or land or rental is being needed, that as long as we've identified and have a proper instrument of interest, then the grantor, which in this case the federal government, that's all that matters. And so my experience is they don't want, at least with my experience, they don't need to see an ownership paper. They just need to know that we have a relationship established already with the owners of the property, which at this point is the federal government. So I guess their other hat, because one side of the federal government is going to be approving the license to use the Eagles Fields area, and the other side is going to be helping. We're going to be looking at grants on the other side. So I'm sure they're going to be looking at each other as it's the same people, if you understand what I mean.
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
How about from public health? Sorry, Mr. Chair, go ahead.
If I may interject, Senator Ada, I think, and correct me if I'm not mistaken, I think the term you're looking for is site control. Am I correct? So would they just be looking for who has site control?
Who has site control, correct. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. From Public Health, Ms. Tarian?
Sure. Senator, before I answer your question, I know Senator Blas asked me a question earlier about funding, and I was reminded that based on a report that was submitted or put together by the Healthcare Financing Task Force, we're looking at $100 million for public health. And in terms of funding right now, Public Health currently pays $2.8 million in both federal and local funds and office space. So the goal is to use that money towards helping to support the funding of the new public health facility. In terms of having Eagles Field as the ideal location for public health, we are also in support of that area only because it would definitely, like Lillian said, it definitely is central. We want to consolidate all the offices into one facility, similar to a one-stop center where everybody can just go to get their services without having to drive throughout the island to get that.
But any federal grants that you have applied for require ownership of the property or just site control?
So in terms of federal grants, I know that our staff, our program managers have been working closely with our project officers to determine if the funds can be able to be used to support the facility. Is that your question, Senator? Okay, so from what I understand, we do have some funding that would definitely support that. And right now it's at 2.8 million, which is what we're currently paying in office space.
Okay. Lillian, how about with GMH?
I'm not familiar with the requirement that it has to be owned. The facility has to be, and the site has to be owned in order for us to avail grants. We don't have a whole lot of grants. We do have like the emergency preparedness grant that we have, but the requirement, the criteria for in order to qualify for those grants, that we must own it, I don't have that information, Senator. I can look for it and get back to you.
Okay, thank you. And then, so my other question is, we did mention about the Army Corps of Engineers estimating that the hospital will be about $700 million. Now, is this built to military standard using a type of program that they go by in determining cost of materials, determining cost of labor? Because labor for the military, as you know, is twice as much than the civilian side. So would this hospital actually be cheaper or cost the public less than a military hospital built and estimated or assessed by the Army Corps of Engineers?
Based on my interactions with them and when they were here and the discussions that we've had, the standards are really not military standards, but U.S. Regulatory, the fire safety, national NOSHA, and accreditation standards, and codes for how hospital rooms are supposed to be in terms of height. Those were the standards that they were following. They were national standards, not military standards.
Okay, so you mentioned that you relied on the Army Corps of Engineers because I believe who built the individuals that built the Guam Regional GRMC, aren't they local? Aren't they a local company or local folks that are here?
I don't think so. They had some consultants from the national, from the U.S., but I don't think it was a local contractor. They may have some subcontractors. I don't know all the details. I wasn't involved in the building of the GRMC.
So would you look into that to see if we have the local talent here before, we say that, perhaps maybe we need to stick with the Army Corps of Engineers or things like that? I believe that when we use our local money to build the hospital and we're putting on, especially this type of investment, that we should try and keep the money as local as possible so that, we can rebuild our own economy versus, contractors coming in from off island or whatever it may be, and then we have to farm that out and send it off island.
I'm sure they could use some of the talents that we have locally, but the overall picture of it, the design, building a hospital is very complex. And you've seen it, we see it in the hospital, we live it every day. It's a very complex operation and facility, and there are many regulations, many standards we have to make sure we adhere to. And the kinds of procedures that we do, diagnostic procedures, we're dealing with radiation, it's just a very complicated facility to really put together, and you really need the expertise of engineers who have done it before. And I don't know anybody on island, unless you know somebody on island who has that expertise as an engineer.
Yeah, well, I guess that we'll have to look, because I'm not sure. Okay, thank you.
Senator, if I can add.
Oh, sure.
And I know we've had discussions with Public Health and GMH, and Lillian, you'll recall these discussions with DPW as well as GORA, who have the expertise of building. No one on Guam has the expertise or the experience of building a hospital. They may be the local agent, but they would have to bring in partners who have that experience. So right now, Army Corps of Engineers is the only one that has experience in building healthcare facilities that we know of today. But locally, even if we go with the local, like let's say a construction management, they would still need to build partnerships with people who have experience in the mainland. So unfortunately, nobody on Guam has had the experience of building a healthcare facility. And I'm parroting And this is what I've gotten in discussions with DPW as well as GORA, who do build. So,
Okay, thank you.
just.
Thank you,
for
Mr. Chair.
input.
That's the only questions I have for this round. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Ada. Senator Moylan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the panel, and I really appreciate everyone's efforts looking at different sources of money and different grants out there, to include our congressman also looking for those grants to help us build these facilities that we desperately need. I guess my one question then for Gita would be, we're also, when we're looking at the number of 35 million to go to market, for now we're banking on that we have 300 million from the ARP funds to go into this pot, right, in order for us to feel comfortable with this 35 million that we want to go to the market. So we're really needing that 300 million, and we're trying to subsidize the rest of this from the different sources that our team here is aggressively seeking out to include the congressman. Am I correct? We need that 300 million to be part of this, or we had to find 300 million from the other grants that we're seeking.
Thank you, Senator. I think that Governor Leon Guerrero has made it clear that she's very committed to funding the hospital utilizing proceeds from ARP. And I think that she's very open to the full 300 million, or if there's other grants, then it could be less. If there's, I think but yes, I think she would be comfortable to reaffirm her commitment to utilize ARP for the purpose of the hospital.
Thank you.
Or or the medical campus at large. I shouldn't just say the hospital, the medical campus.
Understood, thank you. So I'm wondering now, do we have the commitment from the Treasury Department that we can use the ARP funds of the $300 million? Is that solid?
Senator, when we were in Washington, we asked them, and there was the Deputy Secretary there, they said they would consider it and get back to us. They haven't done so yet.
May I ask, did we follow up with a letter to the Deputy Secretary, and when was this ask made?
The ask was made when we were in Washington at the end of July. Yes, and we have followed it up. The Treasury, to give them their due, has many questions after them, and this is an ask which they said no one else has asked. So I'm not surprised that we haven't yet got a response.
Okay. Is it possible that we can see that letter also, that for us, just for our view? It'd be nice to have that letter for us to be able to review that, if possible, in a follow-up letter. And when do you anticipate, are we supposed to go with another follow-up, maybe within a month or so, please?
Yes, Senator, there's a possibility that there might be a follow-up in November, early November.
In November?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Moylan. Senator Duenas, do you have any questions, sir?
Mr. Chairman, and yes, I do. So I think this might sound kind of basic, Mr. Byrne, and maybe to Daphne as well. As the budget has been passed, we were kind of going back and forth as to whether or not this will end up being an appropriation for this purpose. I know this might sound like a simple question, but do you accept that the bill as passed has set aside the $35 million for this purpose?
Senator, you're referring to the budget bill?
That's correct.
Yes, there was.
Okay, so you have no other...
There was a provision for it in the budget bill, yes.
So there's no other anticipated use at this time from the administration for the use of this funding as identified in the budget?
Well, the administration isn't going to anticipate any use other than what is in the budget, and this bill confirms it.
Sure. So I just wanted to make sure that we're all on the same page, so that because there has been some discussion even as much as with the chairman, what fiscal year we would be working. So I just wanted to make sure there's no question whatsoever that this is the source. And I'm building on that for a purpose. Melanie, I think it's important, and maybe Tina will chime in here. This bill, of course, has come back now before the Committee of the Whole. As the chairman has spoken about, and I want to stick to this kind of financing, I think all the other questions have been really about location and different issues. But on the basis of financing, it went back to committee because Gita was going to evaluate a number of amendments that were proposed. And you have comments on all those amendments. What I want to ask on the record now is, with your comments and as the bill was reviewed by you, is the bill with proposed amendments, does it or will it satisfy in its current form being a financing mechanism for the medical campus?
Thank you, Senator Duenas. Yes, we are comfortable that it does. We did work with the office of the sponsor with the language.
So you're comfortable the way it's put together now that it is a solid, marketable financing mechanism for the medical campus?
Yes, yeah, yes.
Okay, thank you. And Tina, the reason why I wanted to kind of go down the line here is that we've established that now. Does this proposal mirror, because I know that you had the experience and had actually gone to market, does this proposal mirror hot bonds and kind of that setup in terms of having a financing mechanism of a number of projects that aren't completely put together, don't have all of their plans put together yet, although you have a financing scheme that identifies several projects? Is this a similar arrangement in your view?
I will let, Tina will answer as well, Senator, but from my view of going after financing, specifically if we're talking about, to start with the hospital, you're financing one structure, one building, not multiple concepts or a conceptual idea. If it appeared that this authorization was large enough to cover, it would still cover 3 buildings. Well, theoretically 3 buildings, but it would cover the buildings for 3 agencies. And so as opposed to, again, as opposed to conceptual plans. And so for that reason, I would not liken it to the hot bond. I would liken it more to the construction of some of your schools through the leasebacks. Tina may disagree.
No, I was going to say it does mirror a lot of the basic concepts we had in the school lease financings. Of course, there was more added because of new rules and so on, and that's why it's so much thicker. We had to clarify terms, but it started with the school lease back and built on from there.
And the reason why I want that kind of to be my final question is because I think there is going to be a debate when this is all said and done. I mean, are we going to focus on the hospital or are we going to accept this model as a financing scheme, knowing that it doesn't have to have the debt service for all of the projects up front? It can identify a budgetary amount, and whatever that amount would finance, and based on what project had a completed plan and ready, shovel ready, if you will, to use an Obama term, then that's how it would go. You would go along, but the bill could authorize the multiplicity, but it would be subject to fund availability and what the ceiling of the funding for the project was. Would you concur?
That's correct. If we ran this scenario today, our underwriters, and they've looked at the bill as well, have said that you could probably raise about $500 million. So we know, based on what we have today, how much more we're seeking in grant funding. So it's very good that if we're able to pass this today so that we could keep moving it forward to help the hospital and public health and so on. But yes,
So my final question, I don't think it would affect the marketability, but I'll just ask it this way.
It should be thought of, when you're putting in infrastructure, you should be considering the whole campus, power, water, wastewater. We should be thinking about the whole campus, not just the hospital. And so if the proceeds from this transaction were used for infrastructure, then I would like to see language that is inclusive of the other two, even if it's not specific to building the other two, but if it's laying the groundwork for the campus, but specifically building the hospital. Does that make sense, Senator?
And that was what I was asking. If we, not that we would eliminate the others, but we would state very clearly that the will of the body was for the hospital to go first. Even if you did it as a voluminous plan as a campus, but knowing that the hospital, as far, I'm not saying it is, this body may say that the hospital is the priority.
No doubt the hospital is a priority because of the condition it's in. But I have to say that we really need to consider a healthcare campus, because Guam Behavioral Health going to the Manilo site is not just a novel idea. It's because we interact with each other and our clients are practically the same. So this is about being very client-centered and being available and interneting even our electronic records, as well as sharing certain services such as the lab. So the lab that already has funding, that it's probably going to be the building that goes up first because it has clear funding, is going to be shared not just by the hospital, but by Guam Behavioral Health and Public Health. I mean, GMH and Public Health. There's a lot of services that we interact, but really, it's important, and maybe I'm just more focused about client-centered because we're a CARF-accredited agency. And so as a CARF-accredited agency, I always think, what is best for the clients? And most of our clients are shared clients. And so we really need to look at this. You can't put infrastructure, you know, as Mel said, you need to see this as a whole, because the healthcare agencies work in tandem with one another. And I think it'd be the wisdom of the body to think of it as a health campus. And because I need them, I can't stand by myself. There's a lot of services I use on both sides,
And
Public
that's
Health
what,
as well as GMA.
and that's what might create an issue for us, because while we want to and we understand the need to be client-centered, we also need to be finance-centered. What do we have? What amount of money do we have for debt service? And so that's why I'm saying I need to know from Gita, and we need to keep following up. If they're going to go to market and they've only got $35 million and they haven't received all the other grant funding and all the other funding that will defray the over $1.1 billion request for the campus, we've got to be cognizant of that. That's part of the planning. And so we'll continue to debate that. Thank you. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Reyes. Senator Nelson, do you have any questions at this time? None? Madam Speaker, do you have any questions for the panel at this time?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to the panel for being here. I know it's been a long day. The Director of Revenue and Taxation, Director Shimizu, you said earlier that that the EITC reimbursement would apply for calendar year, tax year 2021. So when you were here at the budget time, I think you couldn't confirm that. So is this confirmed now with Treasury?
Right, and so, you know, of course, especially over the last month or so, there's been some communication, of course, you've asked me, and I know Senator Tello Tedegui has also sent some communication about it. So I've actually also engaged in discussions with the IRS with regards to it, and so, again, what was pointed out is that although it does indicate calendar year, it also indicates further down It's for EITC for taxable years beginning in the calendar year. And I think that makes it very clear that it really has to be tax year 2021.
All right. And so will you be expecting to receive a reimbursement for EITC for tax year 2020?
No, not for tax year 2020.
Are you expecting to receive any EITC reimbursement before October 1st?
Before October 1st, 2021, no.
In the next few days?
No.
That's the new fiscal year, right? So what about if you received EITC reimbursement between October and December 2021, that is still for tax year 2021, which the returns are not filed until January 2022.
It could be January or February.
Okay. All right. And so if you received any reimbursement between October and December, that would be an advance.
Right. And if we receive anything ahead of us actually paying out the money, so that's considered an advance.
Thank you. All right. And so if I could talk to Gita now about the financing mechanisms in the bill. So the bill, of course, is primarily to authorize leaseback financing, and that was to avoid debt service. That's what I've heard. And so because of our debt service ceiling, our debt ceiling, yes. And thank you. So if you could just explain the bond provision here. So on page 13 of the bill, section 83110 also authorizes what looks like bond financing. Is this similar to the other bond financing that we have seen, or is this something different?
So what's new here from other financings is that it recognizes GATA as an issuer and on behalf of the government of Guam. And this helps to secure a triple tax exempt financing because triple tax is authorized for government of Guam issuers. So it'll be a lower interest rate for our investors that we would be able to secure, and more investors are interested in that triple tax exemption. But other than that, everything is similar to what we've stated before, have access to tax-exempt bonds.
This, if you utilize financing in this section, the bond financing section, would that impact our debt ceiling?
No, Madam Speaker. We'd be issuing certificates. We'd be entering into what's called certificates of participation, and then the leaseback, so the lessor would be issuing the bonds or entering into the debt instrument on our behalf. So the impact would be to their debt ceiling, not to ours.
Okay, so that would, but we would still be paying on those, but that would not be included in our debt ceiling count.
That's correct,
Okay.
Madam Speaker. It's treated like paying rent to own.
All right. Then, all right, so we talked about, we need to pass this bill because of financing, but we also talked, in previous hearings that if it's leased back, we know, we're not going to be making the payments until the buildings are built and we're leasing it back. But you talked about preliminary projects. Wait, where's my notes? It's here. Well, I guess I wanted to ask you, so please specify the projects you intend this bill to fund preliminary to the charrette that is going to be done by the Army Corps.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. There's approximately 13 site survey type of transactions that we need to enter, including contour mapping, soil survey, water transmission and distribution, wastewater, electrical power grid. These are, this is a list that we have, that the GITA team assembled based on our experience with other construction projects, such as those covered in the hot bond. In addition to those projects, there's also some infrastructure work that can be done, including GPA has preliminarily proposed potentially a new substation and additional transmission lines on from Route 10 to the new substation, and those are approximately, I don't know, 15, 16 million, but that's power alone. It's not, we're still in discussion with GWA, as well as with, there's also communications to consider, so the telecommunications aspect of the project, in addition to the roads.
All right, yeah. I thought when the task force was comparing different properties and which one would, to use for this project, that they had estimated that the infrastructure for the Eagles Field property would be about 200 million versus 50 million for the old hospital property. I remember that in one meeting, but if I could ask you, so if you're going to pay for projects such as site surveys, the ones you described, or infrastructure work, how would you do that with this bill? You're going to do a lease back on those types of projects?
There's a section, I believe, of the bill that discusses the design work, and so it can be negotiated with the awarded company, whether or not they will undertake these projects or it shall be undertaken by the lessee, which is us.
All right, but the there is no awarded company prior, I mean, no, sorry, please explain that.
I think that, Madam Speaker, it can be, I think it can be a mix of the two and what makes sense and timing-wise. When you're issuing an RFP for the lease back, we can include, so for example, we may wish to do a soil survey now and draw down on and the governor may wish to fund that now out of ARP. Or as we kind of continue to progress along this project, it may be something that we factor into the RFP that is issued. So give us the terms of, if we wanted to enter into a design, build, et cetera, design, build, maintain, but as part of the design, there's the site survey work in addition to the infrastructure expansion that needs to be done. Again, there's also the interplay of any grants that may be obtained from now until that time that could offset some of these costs. So these
Okay,
are all.
sure, and I hope that any of the costs that you're talking about, preliminary costs, can be paid without this bill. They can be paid through the ARP funds, they can be paid through grants, other grants. I don't think we need the authority of this bill to take care of any of those. The issue is, in authorizing, an RFP for a design, build, and lease back and maintenance. The whole kind of circular issue that I feel like we keep coming back to is that, so the Army Corps during their meeting described that to get the charrette done, the meeting as to what the needs all are and what should be included in the design, that would take, it would take 1 to 2 months to gather data and compile reports before the charrette could take place. That's 1 to 2 months. And that they've estimated that charrettes typically take 1 to 2 years to complete. So that means that, they would complete this charrette at the earliest, looks to me, January 2023. And if they take, that's 1 year, and if they take 2 years, January 2024. And I know the governor wants to, rush this, so it would be, party.
The clock.
Oh.
We got one more round,
expired?
ma'am.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Were all the answers provided to that last question? Oh, no. we'll go ahead and move on. We're on our second round, my colleagues. Is 5-4. Senator Clint, we'll start with, what was that? Let's take a quick recess real quick, and then, all right? The committee of the whole is called back to order. Senator Shelton, you are recognized, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Notwithstanding the House rules, I move to suspend discussions and rise from the committee of the whole. And just for information for the body, we will come back from a short recess to vote on some time-sensitive bills today.
On the motion, hearing, are there any objection? Motion carry. We stand in recess.
Mina 36 na Legislature in Guam is back from recess. Senator San Augustine, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Notwithstanding the House rules, I move that we go to the third reading file to vote without engrossment on resolution number 143-36 LS as amended on the floor and bill number 184-36 COR as amended by the Committee on Public Safety, Emergency Response, Military and Veterans Affairs, Mayor's Council, and Public Transit, and further amended on the floor.
On that motion, are there any objections? Hearing and seeing no objection, motion carries. We are now on the third reading file. First item on the third reading file is resolution number 143-36 LS. Clerks, please read the title.
Resolution number 143-36 LS, as amended on the floor. Introduced by Therese M. Terlahi, Jose Pito Terlahi, Tello T. Taitigui, Joanne Brown, Sabina Flores Perez, Talina Cruz Nelson, Joe S. San Augustine, James C. Moylan, V. Anthony Atta, Christopher M. Duenas, Frank Blas Jr., Tina Rose Muñoz Barnes, Clinton E. Rigel, Amanda L. Shelton, Mary Camacho Torres, relative to expressing the support of Imina 36 na Legislature in Guam and advocating for the passage of H.R. 3730, which seeks to amend Title 38 United States Code to establish in the Department of Veteran Affairs an advisory committee on United States outlying areas and freely associated states, and for other purposes.
Roll call.
Senator Atta. Senator Atta, aye. Senator Blas. Senator Blas, aye. Senator Brown. Senator Brown, aye. Senator Duenas. Senator Duenas, aye. Senator Moylan. Senator Moylan, aye. Vice Speaker Muñoz Barnes.
Senator Nelson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to make a motion that we excuse members not present.
On that motion, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries.
Vice Speaker Muñoz Barnes excused. Senator Nelson. Senator Nelson, aye. Senator Perez. Senator Perez, aye. Senator Rigel. Senator Rigel, aye. Senator San Augustine. Senator San Augustine, aye. Senator Shelton. Senator Shelton, aye. Senator Taitigui. Senator Taitigui, aye. Senator Terlahi. Senator Terlahi, aye. Speaker Terlahi. Speaker Terlahi, aye. Senator Torres. Senator Torres excused.
Resolution number 143-36 LS received 13 ayes, 0 nays, and 2 excused. Resolution number 143-36 LS is duly adopted by the body. We are now on bill number 184-36 COR. Clerks, please read the title.
Bill number 184-36 COR, as amended by the Committee on Public Safety, Emergency Response, Military and Veteran Affairs, Mayor's Council, and Public Transit, and further amended on the floor. Introduced by Joe S. San Augustine, Amanda L. Shelton, Talina Cruz Nelson, Tina Rose Muñoz Barnes, Clinton E. Rigel, Jose Pito Terlahi, V. Anthony Atta, Frank F. Blas Jr., James C. Moylan, Christopher M. Duenas, Therese M. Terlahi, Joanne Brown, Tello T. Taitigui, Sabina Flores Perez, Mary Camacho Torres. An act to authorize the Military Order of the Purple Heart, Guam Chapter 1315, to use a portion of the Skinner Plaza to establish the Guam Pacific Island Gold Star Families Monument, honoring Guam's Gold Star service families whose son or daughter made the ultimate sacrifice in service of our island and country.
Roll call.
Senator Ada. Senator Ada, aye. Senator Blas. Senator Blas, aye. Senator Brown. Senator Brown, aye. Senator Dueñas. Senator Dueñas, aye. Senator Moylan. Senator Moylan, aye. Vice Speaker Muñoz Barnes. Vice Speaker Muñoz Barnes, excuse. Senator Nelson. Senator Nelson, aye. Senator Perez. Senator Perez, aye. Senator Rangel. Senator Rangel, aye. Senator San Augustine. Senator San Augustine, aye. Senator Shelton. Senator Shelton, aye. Senator Tydegui. Senator Tydegui, aye. Senator Terlahi. Senator Terlahi, aye. Speaker Terlahi. Speaker Terlahi, aye. Senator Torres. Senator Torres, excused.
Bill number 184-36 COR received 13 ayes and 2 excused. Bill number 184-36 COR is duly passed by the body. That concludes our third reading. We will resume with the Committee of the Whole. However, if I could make 2 announcements. The legislature has been called to session on October 5th, 7:30 a.m. for the state funeral services for the late Mayor Doris Teresita Flores Lujan. I will also be calling the legislature into session on October 8th at 12:30 p.m. for the state funeral services for the late Commissioner Ramon L.G. Canata Sr. Senator Nelson, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to make a motion that we recess tomorrow till 9:30 to reconvene in Committee of the Whole.
On that motion, is there any objection? If not, we will reconvene tomorrow at 9:30 in the Committee of the Whole. Motion passes. We are adjourned.